I'm Shahar Azani, and in the news, a fifth round of elections in Israel is looming as the Knesset is set to disperse. Israel's politics is once again in turmoil as Israel's Knesset is expected to pass the final legislation for its dispersal this week. And Foreign Minister and alternative Prime Minister Yair Lapid will become the Prime Minister of Israel's transitional government until the establishment of a new, stable government in Israel, hopefully, after the elections. Prime Minister Bennett and Foreign Minister Lapid announced last week the decision to dissolve the 24th Knesset after just 1 year due to difficulties maintaining their fragile and diverse coalition. How has this last government been for Israel? And what lies ahead for the embattled Jewish state? With me to discuss this and so much more is our good friend Ben-Dror Yemini, speaking to us all the way from Israel. Ben-Dror is a celebrated author, writer, senior political commentator, and journalist with the Hebrew daily Yediot Achronot and many other media outlets in Israel. Ben-Dror, it's a pleasure to have you with us again. Thank you so much for joining us. How are you?
Thank you so much, and thank you for having me.
So let me first ask you, Israel is headed for another round of elections, but before it's actually going in that direction, do you think there is any chance of establishing a different government within this composition of the Israeli Knesset?
In the Israeli politics, everything is possible. So never say never. It might happen. They have something like, I don't know what, 48 hours. I don't think it's going to happen, but you never know. I have no idea what is going behind the scenes, and maybe, just maybe, it will happen, but I guess not. I guess we will see Yair Lapid as Prime Minister, yes.
We talk about a fifth round of elections, not just another round of elections in Israel. What makes this a fifth round? Like, how do you frame this round of elections?
Nothing special. I mean, it's going to be about the same kind of issue in Hebrew, we say, can Bibi, lo Bibi, which means yes, Bibi, Bibi Netanyahu, no Bibi. So it's not going to be not about the peace process that does not exist. It's not going to be about religion and state. It's not going to be about settlements. It's not going to be about one of the issues that really were part of the Israeli story and so many disputes during the last 20, 30 years. No, it's not going to be about that. It's going to be a kind of the same from the same, unfortunately. And I don't think that we need this kind of election, but this is part of the Israeli democracy. So when people say, wow, what is happening to Israeli democracy? This is the Israeli democracy. I mean, yes, okay, we have our own difficulties with forming a coalition, yes, because of the way the Israeli system is working. Maybe it should be changed, but nobody is going to discuss about changing the system right now.
So you're telling me, Ben-Dror, that in the course of the last year, there hasn't been any serious discussion on any of the other matters that have always been at the center stage of Israeli political debate?
I think that most Israelis know that the Israeli government last year functioned in such a good way, but the big debates of the Israeli society were not on the table. They were not because, I mean, first of all, let's admit, unfortunately, right now we don't have a Palestinian partner because I don't have to repeat and say, well, they were offered the Palestinian state, they rejected the Clinton plan, they rejected the John Kerry and the Barack Obama plan in 2014. Unfortunately, right now, it's not that we can offer them something new. We know it, and people know it. Does it mean that everything is perfect with our relationship with the Palestinians? No, it doesn't mean. But it's not going to be one of the issues in the upcoming election.
The last year has been a very interesting year in Israel. For the first time, we have seen a significant change in the composition of the coalition with the participation of Mansour Abbas and the United Arab List as part of the coalition. And many people refer to this year as some sort of an experiment, as a trial to see, did this work, didn't this work? Shed a little light on this debate for us. What does that mean for you?
Let me tell you a story. Some years ago, it was at the end of 2018, I participated in a panel of the Arab leaders in Tel Aviv University. And actually, I was the only one Jew in the panel, but it was quite a nice kind of debate took place. I was surprised. There was somebody there. There were in that time some heads of the Arab parties. One of them surprised me. He spoke about, well, first of all, we have to respect the Israeli law. Second, we are part of the Israeli society. Third, we have to hand over to the Jews and say, we are Israeli citizens, we respect the Israeli law, and so on and so on. And we are going to change our platform for the next election, speaking about the first one in the so many rounds that we are speaking about. And I was surprised. I didn't know who is the man. Of course, I approached him immediately after the panel, and we spoke. It was Mansour Abbas.
Wow, and that was what year?
Yeah. No, we are speaking about 2018.
Wow.
2018. And I wrote an article about it immediately after. Look, something new is happening. Nobody knew the name Mansour Abbas. Now everyone is, of course, he became the most famous politician in Israel under the circumstances. But in that time, nobody knew who was Mansour Abbas, the head of the Islamic Party. Wow, Islamic Party. But even in Israel, we have to explain it. There are two chapters of the Islamic Party. One, they call it the northern part and the southern part. And the moderate one is the one that was headed by Mansour Abbas. Anyway.
And that's the southern one.
Yeah, the southern one, of course. And he was ahead, but he was not known. Nobody knew, or nobody spoke about him. He told me this is the way that we are changing. He did not say that he was always like that. He did not say, all my life I was a kind of respecting Israel as a Jewish and democratic state. What he said is, we came to the conclusion that we have to change our way in order to be part of the Israeli society, in order to serve the Israeli Arabs. So we are going to make a big change. He did exactly what he said. He kept his word. Since, people like to remind us, look, 10 years ago, he went to visit in the family of a terrorist. Yes, he did. Yes, he did. He does not even deny. Everyone from the Arab leaders did it. He was part of a group of leaders who paid a visit. But he changed his way and he kept his word. And that's the big change. Yes. Just like, by the way, it's very interesting because if I'm trying to zoom out, we know that there is a huge change in the Arab world. I mean, in a way, we have, the people who support normalization and the people who are against demonization, we have so many supporters in the Arab world. We see what is happening with the Abraham Accords. We see what is going with the people in the Arab world. We see how Israelis are welcomed in Morocco, in the Gulf countries, and I do hope that very soon also in Saudi Arabia. But maybe, just maybe, Mahmoud Abbas understood that something is happening and he is part of the change. So we cannot always remind ourselves what happened 20 years ago with the Arabs. Something is happening. There is a change. And maybe, just maybe, Mansour Abbas is part of the change.
You know, the fact is that Mansour Abbas was actually embraced by the Likud and by Abu Yair then Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. We all remember that the headlines when the Prime Minister came and respected, coming together in the committee in the Knesset dealing with the crime in the Arab sector, headed and chaired at the time by the MK, Mansour Abbas, and the Prime Minister came over and, as we say, respected him and honored him with his presence. And yet, for some reason, once Mansour Abbas decided to join the Bennett coalition, adhering to his own principles of making a difference for Arab society, no matter how, no matter where, suddenly he became, as I think it was mentioned even recently in the Prime Minister words, that the United Arab List is anti-Semitic, anti-Zionist, terror-supporting organization. I mean, how do you see the balance between these declarations?
I must admit that it's awful. We have Arabs, and Mansour Abbas is not the only one, who are part of the Israeli society, who declare, we had enough. We want integration and not any kind of separatism or something of that kind. And here is the Prime Minister who, in a way, made Mansour Abbas and his party a kind of a kosher part of the Israeli coalition. Now he's talking against them. Now he is describing them as anti-Semites. Why? Why do we need this kind of rhetoric? I mean, we have enough anti-Semites out there. We do have, I'm not going to deny it. But to go to somebody who is declaring again and again, I recognize Israel as a Jewish state. I want the Israeli Arabs to be integrated, and to call him anti-Semite, it is counterproductive. It's not only a lie. It's not only a propaganda. It's not only politics. It's much worse than that. And let me tell you, it's quite regrettable that the former Prime Minister is using this kind of language.
You know, the truth is also that we might be losing one of the most important experiments of a generation because of small politics. Because at the end of the day, it's in the interest of Israeli society as a whole to integrate, the welcoming part of Arab society headed by moderates like Mansour Abbas, rather than go in the direction of people like Ayman Odeh, who made declarations as to, police officers of Arab descent should leave the police force, and all of the other distancing declarations. But there has been a big question in Israel, and many people have been raising this question of, is Mansour Abbas being truthful? Is he being honest? Is he really interested in being part of Israeli society? How do you view the actual question, and what's your opinion about it?
It's a great question, and you're right. The question is raised again and again, even in Israel, in many articles and so. In Judaism, we have something, you will help me to translate it, mitoch shelo lishma ba lishma. Maybe some people who are watching us can immediately understand what I'm talking about. But even if you don't mean it, let me translate it, maybe you can help. Yep. Even if you don't mean it at the beginning, the outcome is going to be that you really mean it. Right. That's so. Even speaking about people who are coming to synagogues, they don't really mean. But when they begin a process, then later on they
become that process.
Yeah.
The vocation, the goal becomes.
I mean, to tell you that I know exactly what is going on inside the heart and the brain of Mansour Abbas, no, I don't know. I know that what he does really helps in a way, to form new relationship between Israelis, Jews and Arabs in Israel. And yes, we need it. And people who recognize, he's not the only one, by the way. He is not the only one. There is a youth movement called Atidna, of young Israeli Arabs. And they recognize, one of the main principles of this youth movement is recognizing Israel as a Jewish and democratic state. An Arab youth movement in Israel. Amazing. So he is not alone. He is not alone. I'm not saying that they support his party. I don't know what their political views are. Right. But he is not the only one. We are speaking about many, and maybe, as I said, it's part of something which is much wider, speaking about the Arab world and the change that is taking place. Whoever knows the Zogby polls, Zogby institution polls about the change in the public opinions in the Arab world, which is totally welcomed. And this is exactly what enabled the Abraham Accords. This is exactly what is happening when Israelis visit in Arab countries now. They are totally welcomed. So there is a change. And we see the change also in Israel, not the majority, not the older leadership, but Mansour Abbas is representing something which is bigger than him.
So it's very interesting that you draw a parallel between what's happening outside of Israel in the Arab world and what's happening within Israel. But it's quite clear that we're hoping that this round of elections is not going to kill or nip in the bud the potential for a kind of a different, at least political partnership between a big part of the Arab Israeli public and the state of Israel. And I couldn't agree more with you. But I have to ask you, one of the most interesting scenes in the last coalition was to see the regulations pertaining to Israeli law in Judea and Samaria, what we call the emergency regulations that have to be reenacted and reapproved every 5 years. And we have seen the left, namely Labor, Meretz, and Mansour Abbas himself running to approve it, while the entirety of the opposition bloc was objecting to the same thing that was routinely approved by continuous governments. And I think that in and of itself is a big difference, right? This has been an anomaly.
First of all, it's one of the signs of the big difference between the past and the present. But more than that, let me just remind you that we have this kind of election because one of the reasons, not the only one reason, Naftali Bennett, Prime Minister for the moment, until tomorrow, until at least this week, he actually decided to go to a new election to resolve the Knesset, because according to the Israeli law, the moment that the Knesset is resolved, the law
is automatically extended.
Yeah, automatically stands for the next until the next elected Knesset. So he did something in order to save the law. Not that we have so many debates about what should happen with the territories, with the West Bank, Judea and Samaria. But leave it aside. Right now, we need a kind of law and order. And in order to retain the law and order, we need this law to continue. So, and he was quite brave, Mansour Abbas, and also the left parties. They were mature enough in order to say, no, we cannot let the situation deteriorate, that it will be a land without law. So, one more sign that Mansour Abbas and his party, not all the members of his party, but at least 3 out of 4, they did the right thing.
Right, and I think we need to judge Abbas by his own approach rather than nitpick each and every action of the past or member of his government. But I want to ask you for a minute and just enlighten our viewers about the abnormal nature of the last year in Israeli politics. We have seen some lines crossed. We have seen the ethics committee of the Knesset that has not been established. We have seen vehement attacks by the opposition on the very legitimacy of the government and the prime minister and the alternative prime minister. We also have seen cases in which there was not proportional representation of the opposition in various Knesset committees. What's your outlook of the last year for Israeli politics? Is this what Israeli politics is going to look like from now on?
No, I don't think so. It was a situation because of the too many disputes between coalition and opposition. It should not be like that. I'm not sure that everything I'm not going to defend the coalition. I'm not a politician, so I cannot tell you that everything that they did was perfect. No, it's not the case. It should have been better. But considering what the opposition did, against the coalition, this is whatever you describe is just the outcome. No, it's not good. No, it should be much better. It should be much more balanced. The share of power between coalition and opposition. I hope next election will change something, but I'm not sure about that.
I want to ask you something. I'm just, wondering. You're mentioning yes, Netanyahu, no Netanyahu as being at the epicenter of the fifth round of elections, yet again, in the hope of Netanyahu and his bloc to achieve the 61 majority in the Knesset and establish a government. Assuming Netanyahu comes forth today and says, I see my presence in Israeli politics as being too divisive, and therefore I've decided to become president emeritus of the Likud movement or chair of the world Likud and leave the arena for my successors. Isn't it true that at that moment you will have a wide coalition in Israel of over 80 members of Knesset headed by Likud, or is it not the case?
I'm not sure that this is the case, but it's a wishful thinking. It's not going to happen because actually the big support is not for the Likud, is mainly for Benjamin Netanyahu. We don't know. We just don't know what is going to happen if he will retire and will declare himself as president of the party or whatever kind of title. But it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen because the whole story is around him. The whole election is going to be around him. Again, unfortunately, I don't like it. I wish we could have the older debates about the main issues that we are Iran and the global jihad and the two states for two people solution and so on. But it's not the case. Ben-Dror,
especially from your position as somebody who's not a politician, we were mentioning Netanyahu, and even throughout the year of Bennett as prime minister, the name Netanyahu kept on coming up. The focus has always been Netanyahu. It was all about Netanyahu all the time. What's your view of Bennett's term as prime minister? Has he risen to the position of prime minister internally and externally? How do you look at this?
I mean, when you look at the list of the achievements, he was a good prime minister. We have to admit it. He was a good prime minister. It's not that I liked everything that he did. He is, for me, I have to admit, he is a bit right-winger. I don't think that he was right when he did not even want to speak with the leader of the Palestinians, Mahmoud Abbas, even if Mahmoud Abbas is not really willing right now to make peace. But generally speaking about the internal issues, yes, he has a lot of achievements in economy, in other aspects. And some other issues like the kashrut reform, and in some other aspects, yes, this government after 1 year can present many achievements. Will it help or not? I don't know.
You know, they're saying that the last year has been mainly a year of a government at work, passing a budget, ministries that got to work, reforms that went underway, and we're indeed hopeful that Israel is not entering another period of stalemate.
We do hope, we do pray, but let me tell you something. The Israeli democracy is much stronger than the politics of Israel.
Right.
So, so many times I hear people from the right, from the left, oh, we are going to collapse. No, nothing is going to collapse. I mean, I could hear it so many times from left-wingers. I do hear it last year from right-wingers.
Right.
Both are wrong. The Israeli democracy is much stronger.
And now we're talking about Yair Lapid, assuming the prime ministerial position in Israel in the coming few days. What's your view of Lapid as prime minister? I remember an interview he gave, I believe it was 2013, where he mentioned that's his end goal. And to think that only about, a decade ago, if not more, he was still sitting at the chair of leading the Friday night news on Channel 12, then Channel 2, and then he's becoming prime minister. How do you view him as a prime minister?
Let me just for the people who do not know, actually, he formed the government. It was his job, and he did it.
He was a master politician behind it.
And actually, what he showed in the last year and in the forming of government, he is much more clever than what people
give him credit for.
About. Yeah, and because he is a journalist. What does he know about politics? How can he run this very complicated country with all the so many problems that Israel is facing? No, he has a common sense, and that's what we need. He is a man of common sense. Yes, he is in the center. He is not a right winger. He is not a left winger. To my opinion, that's exactly what we need.
And I think it's what you've always said about a lot of Israelis being in the middle.
Yeah, and so by the way, democracies are based on this kind of center, of middle class center, and yes, we still have it. Even if we hear much more, you and I, and all of us, we hear voices of the radicals. Right-wingers, left-wingers, but yet the majority in Israel are in the center, even if they vote for the Likud or for the Labour Party. And actually, he is representing much more than what we think.
It's what you've always said, the silent majority and the very vocal extremes. But you're talking about elements of decency and transparency. In the passing of the baton from Prime Minister Bennett to Prime Minister Lapid, we're actually seeing the rotation agreement upheld. And there has been an incredible show of camaraderie in the statement made by both a few days ago, which truly was a unique sight in Israeli politics when both stood in front of the cameras and spoke so well of each other. And Bennett expressed his desire and welcome for Lapid and assisting him in assuming this position. That was quite the sight, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. And it was even in a way kind of exciting. We are not used to that kind of language.
That's true, we're not.
And with Israeli politics. So it was quite welcomed. And I read some tweets and posts of some right-wingers who are generally speaking against the government. They really praised this kind of phenomena of people who respect their words, who are not vilifying one another, who keep their promises. Yes, it can happen. And they do not really share the same kind of views, Naftali Bennett and Yair Lapid, and yet they could cooperate. They could do a lot of things in favor of the country and overcome their disputes which still exist.
Right. It did stand in sharp contrast to what we've seen in the agreement between Netanyahu and Gantz, when there was an agreement signed and then, let's just say, it was not necessarily completely upheld by the then, prime minister. So that was an interesting comparison to see right there and then, which leads me to ask you about Benny Gantz for a minute. We're seeing Lapid emerging as a leader of the center, maybe center-left. Bennett not sure about whether he's going to run again. Netanyahu necessarily leading the right and the ultra-right. Where is Gantz in all of this? He may be emerging as the center's candidate for prime minister.
First of all, it's possible. Second, he actually also showed a kind of look. I'm also as the defense minister, a kind of maturity. Look, I'm cooperating. I'm part of the story. And yes, he was part of the leadership.
Ben-Dror, from what we're hearing whispered in the political corridors, there were offers made by Netanyahu to Gantz, even now, to create an alternative government in this Knesset and maybe even become first in these rounds, but he apparently did not accept.
Well, I guess one day we will know exactly what's happening.
Exactly. Ben-Dror, it is always such a pleasure to have you with us. You truly are one of the most mavens in Israeli politics there are, and also your connection and interaction with the outside Jewish and pro-Israel world is quite outstanding. I'll mention just The Industry of Lies as one of your many writings and books, and everybody who follows your columns, it's incredibly enlightening and teaching. Thank you for all that you are and all that you do.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, it surely was a fascinating and most important conversation. I look forward to many more with you, Ben-Dror, and I'd like to thank you for the updates and keep up the great work. For JBS, I'm Shahar Azani. Until next time, see you soon. Shalom and להתראות.